Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! You strive to polish the outside of a cup and plate, but inside you are filled with extortion and corruption. Injustice blinds the Pharisee. First, clean the inside of the cup and plate so the outside can look clean. Why did Jesus speak so harshly? What was hidden behind his acts of apparent holiness provoked this fierce rebuke. And most importantly, his words, spoken more than 2 millennia ago, still resonate in our times. It is possible that the same hypocrisy has infiltrated today's churches. Dear listener, in this documentary, we will delve deeper into the true meaning of Jesus' accusation against the scribes and Pharisees. We will discover who these influential and respected leaders of Jewish society are and how their obsession with appearances blinded them to true inner purity. We invite you to join us in this intriguing investigation that reveals the roots of deception and shows us divine justice in its purest form, according to the heart of Christ. Before we begin, I want to thank you for following us and being part of our immortal soul family. We are a family dedicated to faithfully spreading God's Word, and your support is vital. The best way to help us is by sharing this message with all your friends and family. This allows us to continue spreading the gospel and reaching more people with the message of Christ. Let's get started. Christ, the bread that came down from heaven, is the absolute and implacable truth, the enemy of lies and hypocrisy, and the lover of justice. On several occasions, Jesus directly accused religious leaders of being hypocrites, exposing their double standards. His voice resounded in protest against a superficial religion that reduced God's morality to a mere empty formality. Jesus challenges hardened hearts, calling us to an authentic, transformative, and deep faith that is not limited to appearances, but reflects the divine character in every action. Matthew chapter 23 marks a decisive moment in Jesus' ministry, being his last public teaching before the crucifixion. In this speech, known as the 7 Misfortunes, Jesus confronts the scribes and Pharisees, accusing them of hypocrisy. It is the last time he teaches at the temple, the epicenter of the Jewish religious system, marking a breaking point with the authority that rejected him. Throughout the chapter, Jesus denounces their legalistic superficiality, criticizing them for prioritizing appearances to the detriment of the fundamental principles of the law: justice, mercy, and faith. The 7 misfortunes not only expose their sins, but also announce the impending judgment upon them and the system they represented. Dear listener, in this study, we will focus on a single misfortune. However, to fully understand Jesus' harsh words in this passage, we must first examine the historical context in which the scribes and Pharisees operated. These religious leaders were the guardians of Mosaic law and were seen as models of righteousness by the people. Although they advocated ceremonial purity and strict observance of the law, Jesus saw beyond their appearances. For him, true purity began in the heart, not just in the ritual observance of commandments. The Pharisees, a sect of Judaism that developed after the exile, created a detailed system of rules for maintaining holiness. Over time, these rules became more important than the spirit of the law. Legalism has replaced love, compassion, and justice, leading to superficial religious practice. Now, let's do an analysis and focus on verses 25 to 28 of chapter 23 of the Gospel of Matthew. Let's start by reading verse 25. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! You clean the outside of your cup and plate, but inside you are full of extortion and injustice. God's impending judgment for their hypocrisy manifested itself in impeccable outward care, but deep inward corruption. Jesus showed them that they were symbolically cleaning only the outside of the cup and plate, while the inside remained dirty. Ritual purity was of great importance to the Pharisees, who cleaned their vessels and performed ceremonial baths. The school of Shammai, dominant among the Pharisees at the time, argued that the outside of a vessel could be cleaned, even if the inside was very dirty, in contrast to the minority school of Hillel, which believed that it was necessary to first clean the inside of the cup. Jesus aligns himself with Hillel in teaching in this regard, but he does so to emphasize a symbolic statement about the need for internal purity, referring to the state of the heart. The Pharisees, strict in their observance of ceremonial laws, focused on external purity, such as cleaning objects and observing religious norms. However, this emphasis often neglected the inner purity of heart and intentions. In this context, Jesus criticizes legalism that prioritizes external appearances and calls for a genuine purity that comes from within, not just superficial conformity with the laws. Jesus told them that despite their outward appearances, inwardly they are full of theft and injustice. Although they took great care to project an outward image of righteousness, they neglected an inward one filled with sin and corruption. Corruption of the Pharisees, under the guise of holiness, abused their position of authority to exploit the most vulnerable, such as widows. Instead of protecting and helping, Jesus denounced it as an act of theft. Not only did they follow the law to be seen by others, but they also acted greedily, manipulating the law and traditions for their own benefit. Although they presented themselves as guardians of the law, their true interest was their own well-being and wealth. They focused on trivialities like tithing herbs, ignoring the fundamental principles of the law, justice and mercy. This made them hypocrites, appearing righteous while acting unjustly. They were doctors of the law, but their hypocrisy made them experts in pretending to be what they were not. This caused the religion they professed to become empty and devoid of any real meaning. Dear listener, is now clear why these religious leaders opposed Jesus and spoke evil words against him. It was nothing other than his corrupt heart, and that's why they acted like that. The Lord's statement is true. Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. Their opposition and wickedness revealed the true corruption that lay deep within. Let's continue reading verse 26. Blind Pharisee, first clean the inside of the cup and plate so that the outside can be clean. In this passage, Jesus continues to expose his deep criticism of the superficial religiosity of the Pharisees, calling them blind. Jesus not only denounces the hypocrisy of the Pharisees, but also their inability to perceive essential spiritual truths. Despite their vast knowledge of the law and apparent devotion, they were spiritually blind, focusing on the external and insignificant details, ignoring what really matters: justice, mercy, and inner purity. This spiritual blindness prevented them from understanding the essence of God's heart, replacing an authentic relationship with him with a superficial void of legalism. Jesus counsels the Pharisees, knowing that they would not accept his advice because of their pride and lack of a teachable spirit. However, he insists that true cleansing must begin from within, because that is where sinful motivations and actions originate. Trying to correct only the external without a transformation of the heart is a form of hypocrisy, since any external change would be superficial and empty. With the metaphor of first cleaning the inside of the cup and plate, Jesus points out that true purity, according to God, must begin in the heart. If the inside is clean, the outside will be a natural consequence. However, ignoring the inside and focusing only on the outside creates a false image of holiness, a crime that Jesus strongly condemns as hypocrisy. Dear listener, only when the inside thoughts and motivations are clean will the outside, our actions and appearances, reflect this purity. This includes the way we speak, our actions, behaviors, and even the way we dress. However, some fall into extremes. Some say only the inside matters and neglect the outside, while others only focus on appearances. The point here is that true change starts within. When the heart is transformed, purity naturally manifests on the outside. This is the right thing to do. When done the opposite, trying to cover up the outside with supposed holiness, without purifying the inside, it is pure hypocrisy. Let's continue reading verse 27. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! You are like whitewashed tombs, which indeed appear beautiful on the outside, but on the inside are full of dead men's bones and all uncleanness. Jesus uses powerful imagery, comparing the Pharisees to whitewashed tombs to highlight their hypocrisy. At that time, tombs were covered with lime before Easter so that people would not accidentally touch them and become ritually unclean. Although these tombs appeared clean and shiny on the outside, inside they were filled with decay and death. In Jewish tradition, contact with a corpse was considered the greatest source of impurity, and the Pharisees believed that even the shadow of a grave could contaminate someone. These tombs were whitewashed to alert passers-by to their presence. However, the Pharisees, instead of recognizing the warning, acted as if their external purity was a sign of honor, ignoring that this superficiality only hid a spiritual impurity. This metaphor is a direct indictment of the spiritual life of the Pharisees. Although they appeared righteous to others, inside they were full of corruption, hypocrisy, and impurity. Like a tomb that, although it may look beautiful on the outside, harbors bones, rot, worms, and a nauseating odor. Jesus uses the word impurity to describe this condition. The word impurity in the Bible, when translated from Greek, is akatharsia. This term comes from katharos, meaning clean or pure, and the prefix age indicating negation. Therefore, akatharsia means impurity or contamination. In the biblical context, impurity refers to both physical impurity and spiritual or moral impurity. It is often used to describe an internal state of corruption related to sin, immorality, and impurity. Therefore, impurity in the Bible represents everything that contaminates the soul or body, separating people from the purity that God requires. Let's continue reading verse 28. So you also appear to men to be righteous on the outside, but inside you are full of hypocrisy and wickedness. In this verse, Jesus summarizes his criticism of the Pharisees who strive to appear righteous before men, caring more about their reputation than their true relationship with God. Jesus uses the word hypocrisy to describe this attitude, a life of falsehood, where external actions do not correspond to internal intentions. The Pharisees whom Jesus approached were completely corrupt, both morally and spiritually. Their lives were like rotten garbage, a decaying waste, far from true purity. They tried to pretend holiness to others, but this internal corruption contrasted sharply with their external facade of righteousness, revealing the deep hypocrisy that Jesus condemned. Furthermore, Jesus uses the term iniquity, which in Greek means lawlessness or disregard for God's law. This term does not merely refer to superficial disobedience, but to a profound rejection of the purpose and essence of divine law. Although the Pharisees were known for their strict observance of the law and its many regulations, Jesus accuses them of violating them at their core. They focused on more visible and external details such as rituals and rules, while neglecting the fundamental aspects that really matter: justice, mercy, and faith.